Okay, we're continuing on. We're towards the end of the Lamed Tet, the 39 Melachot of Shabbat. We started off last week with Mav'ir, and we didn't finish. Mav'ir is the Melachah of using fire, either making the fire, using the fire to burn something, anything that involves fire. And we spoke about the question of electricity, if that falls into the category of fire or not. We need to know what Melachah it is. We know it's forbidden to use electrical appliances and lights. And nevertheless, we have to know how to interact with it in the different situations, depending on what it is. Either way, it's a sur, and there are certain precautions that we need to take in certain situations. I'm quickly going to review some of the points that I made. For those of you who were not here, I'll go over them again. We left off that there's various types of elevators, and depending on the circumstances, ordinarily one cannot use an elevator, but if the elevator were to stop at every floor, there's a great need for an older person who lives on the 111th floor of the building. I think he should move, but if he's there may be a difference between going up or coming down as far as doing any melacha on Shabbat, depending on what technology the elevator uses. There's various types. Some are more problematic than others, but there are situations where it can be permitted, and every situation should be asked once you consult with the rabbi before using it. You should not assume that he can use it just because he's not pressing any buttons, because the weight in itself sometimes is a factor in contributing to part of the melacha, additional weight, additional electricity. And there's lights going on and off by entering. So there are several problems in elevators, and in some situations it may be okay if it were to stop, for example, at every single stop and he's totally uninvolved whatsoever. So don't just assume that you can use it. But it was a little bit more lenient with madrigot naot, with escalators. The only issue may be perhaps marid ayin in these kind of cases. But as far as melacha, there's no real melacha in escalators. We spoke a little bit about telephones, that one cannot use a telephone, but under certain situations, if there's an emergency, one suspects being called at 2 o'clock in the morning on Shabbat, he's deep in sleep, who can be calling at 2 o'clock in the morning, right? So it could be an emergency. So only if you suspect an emergency, wherever you live, you have relatives and friends, you may be able to push the receiver down with the shinui and then see who it is. These are situations that are allowed because it might be an emergency, and what's involved may not be an issur d'oraita, may not be a real prohibition of melacha d'oraita. It may be only something which is assumed in Rabbanan. So combining the various leniencies, we allow for that if you suspect that there could be a problem. And we talk about the various types of appliances, whether it's a microphone and intercom. One has to, of course, avoid these electronic or electrical gear that would be asur on Shabbat. We also spoke about a menorah automatic, any automatic light, motion detectors, video cameras, automatic doors, causing them to open or to function would be prohibited on Shabbat if you directly do it. Most of the times we don't directly want the motion detector to go on, but if it belongs to us, it's a bigger problem than if it does not belong to us, because if it belongs to us, it may provide some lighting to the surrounding area, and we may be benefiting from the light that goes on. So if it's ours, we should definitely turn it off before Shabbat, if possible. If it's not ours, if you live in a building, or it's very difficult for you to avoid it, and if you can avoid it, you obviously go around it. You definitely try to avoid motion detectors, because you're causing it to come on. If you can't, if there's no way to avoid it, and as long as you don't benefit from the light, you just go your way, and you go through, and you don't care if the light goes on, then it's permissible, there's no other choice. Same thing with video cameras that one needs to avoid, and automatic doors, we said that's the best solution. If you have to get out of the hospital or enter the hospital, and that's the only entrance, for example, then you should enter or exit at the same time that a goy has stepped on the rug or has come to the point where he causes the door to open up automatically. So that would be the only way to do so. Otherwise, it would be a grama, still asur, to cause, even though it's indirect. I don't want it to happen, but it's going to happen for sure. Obviously, we're going to talk about emergencies later. Whenever you're dealing with an emergency, it's a mitzvah for you to do whatever you can to get to whoever can help you. Grama is the cause. When you cause something to happen, you don't want it to happen. You don't intend to do something, but as a result of your actions, you cause something to happen. We'll talk about grama when we talk about extinguishing flames, how to extinguish flames. And the one that was the most interesting one was the mekarel, refrigerator. Before I talk about refrigerator again, a car obviously is asur for one to drive on Shabbat. Every time you press on the accelerator, if it's a 4-cylinder car, you are transgressing 4,000 times, right? Every pitsut, every little explosion that happens, every time you're combining, the fuel is combining with the air, and the flame comes out as a result, the sparks, and all of that combustion that we call combustion, is of course real esh. It's not electricity. It's real esh, it's real fire, and it's on Shabbat. So for you to do the driving, there's no heter whatsoever, except as we will see in certain emergency situations where you need to do it and you don't ask for the help of a non-Jew. You yourself can drive if the need arises, if there's a ruach nefesh, if there's an emergency. And the same thing with the heat. One cannot turn on the heat whether he uses a thermostat or whatever buttons he pushes. But when people are cold in the winter everybody's considered sick. People can easily catch a cold and become sick, and therefore you're allowed to ask a goy. This is one of the situations where you're allowed to ask a goy to do something. In this case, to turn on the heat. The air condition is permissible only in a bet knesset. The tzorech rabim, the tzorech mitzvah. If there's a great need for a mitzvah or for the public in a bet knesset and it's very, very hot and humid, you can ask the goy to turn on the air conditioner. The heat, of course you can, but even the air conditioner. In your private home, you can't ask the goy to turn on the air conditioner. As we will see later on, there's a category called Amira Le'akum. You cannot just tell a goy to do anything for you. The general rule to remember in Chod Shabbat is whatever you can do, you can't ask a goy to do. Otherwise, you defeat the whole purpose. You can have everything being done for you by a goy. So that's the general rule. But there was in Europe something called a Shabbat goy. There was such a term. And it is possible, in certain situations only, to employ a goy. And the typical example is when there's a sick person at home. There's certain things we can't do for him, but a goy would be able to do for him. Obviously, if there's a big emergency, we can do it ourselves. So a goy can be used only in certain situations. Mekarer was a little bit unique. A refrigerator, if somebody forgot the light bulb, he left it on before Shabbat. When you open that door, even though you don't want the light to go on, it happens for sure. Because it happens for sure, it's called a tikreshe. It's worse than a grama. Grama is an indirect cause. As a result of your actions, something else was caused. If tikreshe, it will for sure happen by your direct actions, except that that's not what you want to do. You want to open the door, but the opening door also happens to turn on the light. So obviously everybody who has a light bulb in the refrigerator, and most of us do, either you always leave it off so you don't have to remember Erev Shabbat to do it, or you put some tape on the little button right at the door, right? Or you just remember to twist it right before Shabbat. But let's say you forgot. Now what do you do? So if you have a goy, if the food that's there, you need the food that's there, and there's a goy, you can rely on a goy in these kind of situations. But I'm going to tell you what you can do if there's no goy, which you can easily do. But you have to be very careful on how you do it. You listen to the motor. As soon as the motor is not working, the motor is usually not working all the time, unless you have a refrigerator that has a built-in fan that is continuously working. There are some models that have a fan that continuously works, then you're stuck. But if you have a typical refrigerator where the motor goes off after a while, it's cooled off, it's going to save you money. As soon as the motor is off, take out the cord from the socket, right? Immediately open the door and turn the bulb, right? The whole thing is off right now, so that nothing will happen. Turn off the bulb, immediately put the cord back into the socket. Now, the reason why you have to act immediately and quickly is because if you're slow, when you put back that cord, you may turn on the motor. So some rabbis just say, you know what, just leave the cord unplugged. Don't plug it back in. At least you're safe. And if it's only a few hours till Moshe Shabbat anyway, nothing will happen if you can't take the fridge. Right? But if you do it quickly, there's no reason why you can't do it. And of course, if at all possible, you do it with a shinui. Yeah, but there's no need for that. Because if the motor is completely off, you don't have to be concerned. So that's one way to do it. Using the cord is another way. But that's what you would do with a refrigerator. Sha'on Shabbat. Sha'on Shabbat is in English it's called a timer, I guess. You can't have everything working on a timer in your home in Shabbat. Just like you can't use a goy, right? You can't have why don't you just have a timer to cook everything for you? Right? You can have your whole house run on timers. That's not possible. The Pasuk says, Lo te'aseh melachah. Doesn't say lo ta'aseh. You should not do lo te'aseh. No work shall be done. However, it is done, whether it's by you or somebody else or something else for you. But work cannot be performed for you. Work cannot be done on Shabbat. The reason why we use timers for certain appliances is because there's various additional leniencies, like electricity, which is questionable as to what it is. What's behind that koach of the zeren, of the current? Is it a real form of esh, of mam'ir, or is it something else? So in certain ways, and for certain things, the rabbis permit using timers. Now, so now you have a timer. The timer is meant to turn on the lights, or to turn on the air conditioner. The lights is also a question, but let's assume you have a timer for a variety of things that it's permissible to have them. And something that you have a timer for is going to turn on at 3 p.m. And you say, oh no, 3 p.m. is too late. Everybody's arriving at 1. You cannot go ahead and take that little tripper and put it earlier, so it should turn on earlier. Because the hakdama, lehakdim, it has laka, to make the light go on earlier, even though all of this is only happening through a grama. You're not doing the turning on the light, you're causing it. You're putting a tripper, and it's going to cause the timer to turn on the light. You are not allowed to turn or cause the timer to go on earlier than what it was intended to. But let's say you say, oh no, 3 o'clock, that's too early. Everybody's coming at 7. I don't need it to go on that early. You're allowed to put it on for later. For later, they should go on later instead of early. That's permissible because you're not doing anything. Right? You're not causing any melacha. By making it earlier, you're, in a sense, being gorem, that it should go on earlier. You're causing something. It's something. As opposed to the other way around, making it go on later. So this rule of Sha'on Shabbat, whether it's to turn on later or to turn off, later is permissible, earlier is a fool. Oh, it's going to go off at 5. I want it to go off earlier. You can't do that. I want it to go off later because I need light for longer hours. Fine. You can take that little thing, that tripper, and put it at a later hour. That's permissible to do. So you understood how it works with Sha'on Shabbat? In case you have to make any little changes, it's not mukta. These trippers are permissible for you to move them around, as long as you remember not to move them earlier, whether it's to extinguish or to turn on the lights. Okay, now we can continue on with the rest of Mav'ir. You're not allowed to cause any spark. There are certain things that make spark, even though the spark is not in itself a flame. There are even some toys that make spark. But we don't include in the causing spark static electricity. Static electricity, even though it's a form of spark, right? That's not included here. Because first of all, you don't intend to create static electricity. It just happens. You don't have to be concerned about it. So what I'm talking about here is intentionally using something that makes spark. It's similar, even though it's not an esh, it's similar to esh, and one should not do that on Shabbat. And the same is true with Fuchit Magdelet, using a magnifying glass to make fire. A magnifying glass, on paper, that you concentrate the rays of the sun on the piece of paper with a magnifying glass, and it burns up. Even though that's not the regular way of burning something, it's not ish, it's the tolada of the ish. It comes from the sun's rays. It's also associated with Shabbat with Rabbanan. What? Chuchit, a glass, magdelet. It magnifies. Okay. The following halacha has really a lot more to do with kibui than with mav'ir, but you'll see why I put it over here. This can happen in any home. What do you do if a candle falls from the candelabra? It's dangerous, right? Nothing has happened yet. There's no fire. These candles are mukta, whether it's still lit or whether it's not lit. On Shabbat it's mukta. You can't move the candelabra, you can't touch the candle. But if a candle fell, and there's a danger, there's a possibility that it may spread, it's in such a place, it's not in a metal platter, it's close to where it might cause a flame, you're allowed to move it away. You're allowed to actually take it and put it in a safe place. You cannot extinguish it, right? As you will soon see, mechabeh. Mechabeh is also menacha. You cannot extinguish it, just like that, but you're allowed to move it away or put it in a spot, in a place where it will be safe. The reason I mentioned it over here is because if you're not using candles and you use shemen, oil, in oil there's an additional problem that is related to mav'ir, that you have to be careful not to move a bowl of oil. Because when moving, whether it's a hanukiyah or whether it's anything that contains oil, when it's moved, the oil tends to move and tends to be mav'ir or contribute to the lighting. Because, as the oil goes down, sometimes the light will flicker. There might be some flickering, like in certain lamps that use kerosene. So because of the flickering, you might, and we'll talk about it a little bit later on, there's a Gzerash and Chazal on lamps. Here too, by moving it, you might be contributing. You're not allowed to add oil or contribute more flow of oil, so you would have to be very careful in moving a container that has oil and candles that are lit in it. But with a candle, you don't have that problem. It's a wax candle. But you have the other problem. If it falls, it can make a fire. If it does fall, even though you can move it, you can move it and you don't have to be concerned with, making it, contributing to the light any more than what it already has. You're not contributing anymore. So it's permissible for you to move it if it's going to be a problem where it is. If it's not going to be a problem, just leave it where it is. If it's going to be a problem, you're allowed to move it. Okay, now we're going to get into a very, very important area. One of the most important areas of Mav'ir, and it covers quite a few halachot. There, I'm going to talk about that on the other side. That's under a different melacha. Right now we're still talking about everything, all the applications that have to do with Mav'ir, with making flame, or contributing to a flame. Right? The only reason I mentioned that over here, even though it belongs in extinguishing, it really belongs with muktzah too. It's because of the shemen, because of the oil. Whether you have a chanukiyah, and if you need to move for some reason, because of where it is, otherwise you can't move these things. But you have to move it because it's unsafe. Well, you have to be concerned about this other factor, this other problem, that by moving it, if you don't cause any melacha deoraita, moving it just muktzah midrabanan. But if the oil moves in such a way where it contributes even momentarily to the fire, it's maz'ira. Yeah? Right. Sure, we'll be talking about that later, how to handle fires in your house, under mechabeh. But right now we still need to cover a little bit more about maz'ira. Okay, so we spoke about driving, that is asur, but there are situations, there are quite a few additional applications on what that we need to know how to handle a car. One of them is a complex area called homin. We'll talk a little bit about it next week when we speak about hotza'ah in Pintul, the last melacha, carrying. That will take us probably 2 weeks to cover, or more. What happens if you're stuck in a car and it's already becoming Shabbat? Now, since I'm already talking about this, I want to warn you ahead that anytime you're working on Friday or traveling on Friday, you always should calculate and consider your time, the traffic, the weather, everything, and not come home the last minute. Because you remember Murphy's Law? Anything that can go wrong will go wrong. I think that's the way it goes. Well, things have happened to many people. In New York, where they were stuck because of a snowstorm, they couldn't cross the bridge, they couldn't make it in time to Brooklyn from Manhattan. They had to walk. So what do? We need to know the halachot of what do you do if nevertheless you were careful and you're stuck. You're stuck in traffic, Shabbat is approaching. You can't continue with your car home. You can't drive on Shabbat, no matter where you are. So the first thing we need to know is that if Shabbat is approaching and you are stuck, you need to find a safe place to park your car. That's number one. You immediately get off the freeway if you're on the freeway. Right now we're talking about being in your own car versus being in a taxi. Okay? There's a difference. You're in your own car. First thing you need to do is find a safe place. As soon as you see it's coming close to Shekiah, right? As soon as you see that it's getting there, you don't wait till the last minute. Find yourself, you may need some time to find a safe place. You need to find yourself a safe place to park your car. That's number one. Now what do? Well, you have two choices. Assuming you are in the city and not in the desert or in the field far away from an urban place, right? If you're in the city, even if you're 20 miles away from home, but you're in the city, you have two choices. Walk home or stay in your car. Actually, you have a third choice. Go to a hotel and check in. Okay? You have three choices. 1 second. Now, depending on what you do, you have to consider additional problems. Let's talk about staying in your car. If you're going to stay in your car, well, you have to decide before it becomes Shabbat which windows you want left on, up or down. Especially if you have the automatic windows. You don't have the regular windows that you do. You need some air, right? You want to stay inside. Okay, you want to stay in your car? Fine, you're allowed to stay in your car. Well, you can get out too. But what do you have to consider? The lights. If you're going to open or close the doors, you're going to turn on the lights. So no problem. Solve that problem before Shabbat. By removing, whatever you need to do, every car is different. You can do it. It's possible. Removing that problem, solving that problem by making sure that when the doors are open or closed, the lights don't go on. It's possible to do. So that's something that needs to be taken care of before Shabbat if you're going to stay in your car. Another thing that needs to be taken care of is the windows. If you want it off, if you want it down, you decide which ones you want down. All right? That's if you stay in your car. If you're going to go to a hotel or you're going to go home, you can't carry, right? So you have to put your keys in a safe place and your wallet in a safe place. Whatever you have, you have to put it in a safe place and walk and check into the hotel and spend the Shabbat or walk home, depending on where you are. Now, when I say walk home, the only reason I'm saying walk home is an option is because you are in a city. If you would not be in a city, you will see you may not be able to walk home, even if you wanted to, for a different problem. These are the choices that you have when your car is stuck and Shabbat is approaching. It's a problem. You have to be very careful and do your best that this does not happen. Right? But these are basically your options, and this is what you have to have in mind, and this is what you may have to do. You either stay put, check into a hotel, or if it's not too far from home, walk home, but you have to leave everything behind. And that's what people did in Manhattan in the snowstorm. They had to leave their cars at the bridge and walk 3 hours to Borough Park or wherever they live in Plattsburgh. Right? So you check into a hotel or you stay in the car. What? You make sure that's why you have to think very well. 20 minutes to half an hour before Shabbat. Am I going to make it or not? Let me check in. You don't wait till the last minute. Now what did I do? Right. So we'll talk about that then. Yeah. But anyway, this is the normal situation. We're talking about a normal situation. You got stuck. There's no snow, but you can walk. It's not a big deal. No more snow. It's only in the ground. Now what? It's already Shabbat. It's nighttime. You can't carry. Right? You can't use your car, and you can't just drive. For sure not. So what do? So these are the possibilities. Yes, but you have to be sure that will help you get to where you need to. That will help you get to the hotel or get you home. Yeah. Until Shakiyah. You have to calculate very carefully because if you need time to find a place, you don't want to wait till the last minute. That's not it. Okay, let's say it's not your car. You're in a taxi, or you're in a bus, or on a train, and it happens to a few people. Okay, train late, September 11th, they couldn't figure it out, and it's already Friday. So it's not your car. You still have to get off. You can't travel on a car on Shabbat, even though you're not doing any melacha. You're not doing the driving. You're still not allowed to be in the car because of other reasons too. One of them being Marit Ain. You cannot use the services of a goy to drive in the car on Shabbat. So because of that, you would have to get off and leave your belongings with the taxi driver and let him bring them home to you. Or check into a hotel. Similar situation. Yeah. Well, it depends if it's a New York taxi driver or if it's an LA taxi driver. In New York, you won't get it that. No, it depends. It's more likely than not. If it's a good company. If you can make it on time, yes. Well, if he wants to do it on his own, you can't instruct him. You can't instruct him to do that. All right? Now, all of this is obviously if we're dealing with not a dangerous situation. If what you're about to do will be dangerous, not safe, you're stuck, wearing places like Watts, and you don't feel like walking, right? It's a dangerous place, then obviously that would not be a solution. You would be able to do what you do in certain emergencies. And we're going to get into that in a moment when I speak about emergencies. But all of this was said in normal situations. Normal situations, you can't drive with your car anymore. You have to get off, you have to leave your keys, everything behind. You need to hide them. You have to find a good place for them, that's all. Alright. Before we get to emergencies, another item that needs to be discussed is Home Shabbat. All of these examples that we were discussing was in an urban area, in a city. Los Angeles is a very big city. You can go for miles and miles and miles, and you see it's built up. Even you may be in another city, but it's all connected. In order to get out of the city, built up area, you have to drive many, many miles, regardless of the direction going north, south, east, and west. Well, west, you eventually get to the ocean. But you go for many, many miles, you're in an inhabited area. And that's an advantage in some ways. Because there's something called Hum Shabbat. Hum Shabbat is Alpayim Amot, 2,000 Amot, which is approximately close to between 3,500 and 4,000 feet. It's about a kilometer, a little bit maybe more than a kilometer, less than a mile. There's something called Hum Shabbat, the limit of Shabbat, the limit which beyond we are not allowed to walk. At the end of the city, or at the end of the urban area, if there are no more homes within a certain distance from each other, not sparsely, in other words, one after another, if there are no more homes, just empty fields, you are only allowed to walk 2,000 or more, a little over a kilometer. You're not allowed to walk more than that on Shabbat. Where is this relevant very much? When people go to mountains, camps, which is not built up. You have the camp area, and then you can walk a little bit outside. You want to take a walk, a stroll after eating the meal on Shabbat. You can't go too far. Barely just a few blocks. About a kilometer, a little bit maybe more than a kilometer. That's the Hum Shabbat. After that, you can't. Once you've reached that point, all you have is Arba Amot. You have about 6 to 8 feet. Once you've gone to your Hum Shabbat, that's the most you have is a few feet to move around. Alright? So if you're stuck in Castaic Lake, Friday, you know where Castaic Lake is? North of Los Angeles. And it's quite far. And between Castaic Lake and Los Angeles, there's a lot of open area. It's not like from here to Anaheim, you can go and see only homes. All the way to Anaheim, no problem. Right? But if you start going further, or whether it's north or south, you will have a lot of open area. Once you come to the point that from that point on, there's a lot of open area, you reach the point of which beyond you only have 2,000 or more. So if you're stuck there, then even if you want to walk, you're in good shape, and you want to walk home, and let's say it's not far, we're not talking about 30, 40 miles. All it is 5, 6 miles. And you can walk. You can't. Why? Because of the problem of Hum Shabbat. Now, some say, there's an opinion that Yud Bet Mil, 12 mil, which is about, I think about 10 miles or so, is the Tchum Shabbat according to the Torah. This may be the Rabbanan, and the other one will be the Torah, according to the Torah. So, depending on the circumstances, you may be able to rely that you have more than just 1 kilometer. You may be able to have a little bit more. But sometimes these two may not make a difference because you're way out. You're 35 miles away from home. And this is very of great importance because of a different situation. What happens if you land by plane on Shabbat? So, right? What happened now? You've already gone beyond the Tchum Shabbat. You won't be able to leave the airport. So I'm going to talk about that next. But before we get to that situation of the airport, if you are stuck in your car or in somebody else's car outside the Tchum of Shabbat, and you will not be able to make it home because of this, what should you do? You put up a tent, right? And if you have kiddush, if you have wine, halot, that's what you make in Shabbat. You have no choice. You cannot walk home. You get out of your car, of course, but there's no way for you to get home. However, there are two situations where you may still be able to go home. One is, let's say you are in a place and you need to go to a restroom, and where you are it's not possible, or it's unsafe to stay where you are. Drunk people and other elements that you don't want to be around with. The Chachamim allowed you to enter, to go beyond the Tchum until you've reached a point where you will have a restroom or where you will be safe. Let's say that point is already your house. You can go all the way to your house, but once you reach your house, guess what? You're stuck in your house for the rest of Shabbat. You cannot leave your house, not even to go to Shabbat. So anybody that has been given permission to go beyond the Tchum Shabbat because of whatever reason, wherever he has arrived, whether it's a hotel, a safe house, safe place, or his own home, that's where he needs to remain for the rest of Shabbat. He cannot go outside. Unless it's within the perimeters where he is, it's enclosed, then he can be outside too. Or if there's an eruv, right? A good eruv, then he can be there too. But otherwise he cannot leave that place where he is, which is his final destination. Once he has reached that final destination, all he has is arba amot, 6 to 8 feet or so to move around. So he would not be able to leave that home, that hotel, that lobby, wherever he may be. So there are situations when somebody is outside in a rural place, far away from the city, and he cannot make it on time, and there's the problem of Tchum Shabbat. He would really have to stay where he is. But obviously, if it's not safe, he has to go to the bathroom, things like that. He's allowed to. With Nikvot Habriyot, the rabbis allowed him, gave these exceptions, and allowed him to get to the closest, safest place possible. But once he's reached that place, he cannot leave it till the end of Shabbat. So what do you do with the plane? An airplane arrives on Shabbat. You have to be very careful with taking flights. Just like I explained with cars. You have to be careful when you drive Erev Shabbat that you allow yourself a certain amount of time. Don't take a flight from here to the East Coast on Friday. From the East Coast to the West Coast, it might be a little bit easier because you gain the 3 hours. But even so, you have to be very careful. Do it early in the morning, anything can go wrong. Now once you're on the plane and you know you can't make it, you have to get off the plane. If they allow you to, if it hasn't taxied you. Right? If you see you're already on your plane, but now it's delay after delay for whatever reason, you have to ask for them to let you off the plane. You're not allowed to travel on that plane if you're not going to make it on time. Okay, but let's say anyway the plane took off. Right. No, that's okay. You're in the plane and it's already Shabbat. You arrived on Shabbat. Okay, now what do you do? So you can't leave the airport. You can't go home. You can't go outside of the airport. You have to stay at the airport for Shabbat. Because you've gone with the airplane, you've gone beyond the Tchum Shabbat. And you've arrived on Shabbat. If you arrive in your city at the last possible minute before Shabbat, you can do what my brother-in-law did. You can walk home. It's only 11 miles. It might take you a couple hours, and so on. Might as well enjoy, a good meal and not just Coca-Cola. Or whatever else they have at the airport. So that you can do because you arrive before Shabbat. But once you arrive on Shabbat, you can't even leave the airport. Even though you're already within the city. You've already gone beyond the Tchum Shabbat. All you have is Daled Amot. 4 Amot, 6 to 8 feet. So what do? You stay in the airport. Or if they put you up in a hotel next to the airport, that's okay. Because they're allowed to take you to the hotel. The same is true if the police takes you. If the police takes you, sir, you can't stay here. Well, you want to take me? It's up to you. Thank you very much. You thank him because he might take you home too. If he does that for you and you didn't ask him, that's okay. Because the police can do whatever they want. Almost whatever they want. So if they take you, even though they don't have to, but you don't have to refuse. Right? Yes? No, because he's in the city. In the city, you can walk 50 miles if you want, because there's no Tchum Shabbat is only beyond the city limits when there are no more homes. If the city is very big, you can walk the whole city. If you don't mind, if you don't care, walk. If you like walking, walk 50 miles. Okay, so that's the next point. So if you arrive by an airplane, just like you were driving in your car or you were in a taxi, you have to leave your items behind. You can't take them with you. Right? You can't be metaltel, you can't carry them to the Rabim. Besides the fact that you may have items that might be muktzah too, like your wallet. So you have to somehow leave them behind in a place, in a safe place. If you need your passport, that's okay. Usually in an airport, you usually will not have these days a problem with carrying. You know why? Because when you arrive from the plane to the airport building, you go through these sharvulim, I call them, these sleeves. I don't know what do they call it. You know, from the plane, you enter this little. You're not in the field. You're not in the airport field. You're not in the Reshut Rabim. You're going directly from the airplane to the Reshut Yachid to another Reshut Yachid, to an enclosed building, through these tunnels. Now, these hangars, not hangars. What do they call it? The walkways that you know that the ones that connect to the airplane that extend themselves. So if you're able to go directly from the airplane into the airport building through these things, then you can carry your belongings with you. Yeah, but if they have, since it's all mixed together and you have things which are mutar, then it's okay. You know, but otherwise, if all you had is a wallet, you would not be able to carry it. You'd have to give it to the crew for them to carry it for you. Can you please take my stuff with you? If they refuse, tell them, listen, I'll tip you later. Whatever you do to convince them, they usually do it for you. You explain to them why. Yeah, obviously. Yeah. Yeah, but in the meantime, you're taking your hand luggage from the plane. I'm talking about the hand luggage now. Yeah. Right. Yeah, and there are lockers, and there are places where you may be able to put them. In the airport, right? But that's as much as you can do. So right now, you've come on Shabbat, and you can't go home. You can't go to your final destination. At the most, you can be placed in a hotel nearby. By them, they can place you at the hotel nearby. Otherwise, you're stuck in the airport. Okay, next. Now, a little bit about traveling by car. How do you travel by car? When is it permissible? There are situations of pikuach nefesh, shedocheh hakol, that obviously put aside everything else, including Shabbat. And if there's an emergency, a woman is about to give birth, a child is in grave danger, somebody who's very ill, you're allowed to, and you're not only allowed to, you need to, and it's a mitzvah, to take them yourself to the hospital if there's a grave danger, or a woman is about to give birth. So you don't wait to call a goy, you don't make any phone calls, you do it yourself, you get into the car and you go. However, if there is not immediate danger, but it's very important anyway to get to the hospital, then it's always best and advisable to call a taxi company. Number one, call them on the phone, prepare the exact amount of money that you need to give them. So there's a question of what's better, cash or credit card. Which one is less melacha? One is muktzah, one is your righty, because you may have to sign your name. But anyway, if you prepare the exact amount, it's okay to give them. If you can tell them, listen, I'll pay you later, and he believes you, that's even better. Yeah. But in any way, you're allowed to prepare the exact amount. The exact amount, so you're not stuck with change. Right? You're allowed to take the belongings with you that you will need for the hospital. Only what your wife or the sick child or whatever they need for that Shabbat. You can't take extra stuff. So you're allowed to get into the car and you're allowed to go with a taxi and you're allowed to make a phone call if there's an important need. You have to be careful as much as possible from opening the door yourself or closing the door. That may not be necessary. Let him do that. Right? Same thing with carrying your belongings from your house to the taxi, from the taxi to the hospital. If you can have him carry it, it's better. Whenever you are doing these melachot for needs, whatever you can minimize is important. So there's a difference between a nesiyah of pikuach nefesh and a nesiyah of no pikuach nefesh. If it's pikuach nefesh, life is in danger, it's an emergency. Not only is it permissible, it's a mitzvah for you to do it yourself. No questions asked. You first do, then you ask questions. If you sense that there's an immediate danger, you don't wait to call because you want to do it immediately. Yes. Right? Right. Yes, the husband is also allowed to accompany his wife. He is. This is on the way there. Right. There's a question about on the way back, and we'll talk about that next. But in the meantime, if it's a very big emergency, your wife is mamash about to give birth any moment, you don't wait for a taxi. You take your car yourself. If it could wait, then you take a taxi. I had both situations. With one of my boys, who was born on Shabbat, I took my wife. I waited till the last possible moment when I knew she had a few more minutes to deliver, and then I drove her. As soon as I came to the hospital, I had another problem. I'm not allowed to shut the engine off. So I asked the policewoman, the guard, to please park my car. And she gladly did it. I asked somebody else, they didn't want to do it. So I was going to leave the car there. I'm not allowed to shut the engine. So she parked it, she offered to park, and she brought up the keys to the room. So that's the situation of where you are doing the melacha, which is permissible in the mitzvah, but however, once you get to your destination, there's other things you need to be concerned with. You can't shut off the engine. There's other things you may not be able to do in the car. So you give it over to a guard if you can, let them park it, and so forth. However, and with the second time with my youngest, her wife wasn't due yet. It was early. The child was born early. But there was a need. It was important for her to get to the hospital. So it was determined that what she was experiencing needed immediate medical attention. So it wasn't that big of an emergency. I called a taxi. They took the phone, called a taxi, took her whatever she needed, and we went. So that was the difference between a taxi and doing it yourself, depending on the circumstances. On the way back, however, you can't go home on Shabbat. If there's no emergency, why are you going to go home with a taxi for? So if you took a child to the hospital, you took him to Kaiser because he broke his finger or something. This is before Shabbat. Now it's already Shabbat, you're there. What are you going to do? You're going to be stuck 30 miles away in the hospital, you can't walk home. You can walk home, you just walk home. But if you're far away, there's no kiddush, there's no chalot, there's no nothing. What do you do? Well, you stay there. Now, if that is very inconvenient because there's no food, or because the child is still sick and wants to lay down in his bed, then you're allowed to hire a taxi to take you back home. So in other words, on the way back, when there's no pressing need, you for sure can't drive. But you cannot even hire a goy to just take you back home because you'd just rather be home. No. The only time you're allowed to go back with a taxi is either if somebody's still sick and wants to be home and lay down in their bed. There's no emergency, but they just want to be home. They're not feeling well. They don't want to stay in the hospital lobby, right? And there's still a long, many, many hours till the end of Shabbat. Or a whole night, perhaps. See, if it's already 4 o'clock in the afternoon, just wait till Motzei Shabbat. But if it's a whole night, and you have no food, or it's extremely inconvenient, stay there, or the child is sick, you're allowed to call, it's better to have a goy call a taxi cab. Here, you don't want to call directly. Why? There's no pikuach nefesh. Okay? No problem. You tell them to please go into the door and take the money. Now, if you don't trust them, then you're allowed to say, get the money, give it to him. Whatever you can minimize, he has to open the door. In other words, that way of chazara, you can't call the taxi company. You ask the operator, please call a cab for me. You try not to open the door to get in or get out, have him do it. You don't take your luggage with you, your packages, have him do it, and tip him for it. Tell him, I'll tip you, please do it, I can't do it. Here there's no pikuach nefesh. You have to minimize the melachot. Let me go on because I just want to finish, then I'll take the questions. So that's what you do on the way back. There's a decree in Mav'ir that one should not, lo yateh, in the days where they used kerosene lamps, you wanted to, it was flickering, you wanted to get a little bit more light, you wanted to make the oil go closer, that's a surah. So the rabbis made a gezerah not to read close to a kerosene lamp because you may come to incline it, to get that oil moving, so it shouldn't flicker. So that's the Rabbanan, a gezerah, not to read next to a kerosene lamp, not to read to any lamp where you may come to move it, to where the oil may move, and that would cause mav'ir. Today we don't really have kerosene lamps. The lamps that we have today, we're not concerned if you might do anything good. Let's go to mechabeh. Mechabeh is the opposite of mav'ir, and that is to extinguish a flame. It's a tool to extinguish a flame. In the Mishkan, where did we have mav'ir and mechabeh? We had mav'ir in burning perhaps wood to make coals. Because once you have coals, you can use those coals to make a stronger, hotter fire where you would prepare the vat, where the dye would be. You were making dyes to dye the yeriot, the curtains, right? Or what the torfim, the metal workers used, the fire too. That was mav'ir. That's where you have esh in the Mishkan to make these things. And you also had mechabeh. Mechabeh is when you burnt the wood and you extinguished the wood, you would make a wood that was more easily consumed now. Just like coal. If you take a brand new wick and you light it, it may take a while for you to light it. Right? What do some husbands do every Shabbat? They light it first, and then they extinguish it, and then the women come later, and then they light it. It's easier because the wick has already been lit once. You follow me? So kibui is a sur on Shabbat. To extinguish is a sur on Shabbat. The real kibui is if it's letzorech hadlaka. You're extinguishing the flame on the piece of wood or wick because you want it to eventually later burn better. Just to extinguished like that is not exactly it's still asur, but it's not the real isur in the Torah. Regardless, any type of kibui is asur, whether you do it with blowing at it, whether you use water, or whether you prevent oxygen from coming to it by covering with a cup or by turning off the gas to it. All of this is called kibui and it's asur. The problem is, what about electricity? The current of electricity, we said, is not exactly fire, and there might be some leniencies. Nevertheless, most are of the opinion that electricity is a form of fire. Therefore, you cannot turn off any electrical current just like you can't turn it on. In the same way that you cannot extinguish, you cannot cause something to be extinguished, and that is why you cannot put a hanukiyah of oil or candles next to the delek, to the door, where if you open or close, the wind might blow it out. So you cannot put it too close to the door. And if you did, you can't open the door. If you know that by opening the door, you might come to extinguish it. Even though that's a grama, you can't do it. That is what I meant by grama. You're causing it. By opening or closing the door, you're going to cause it to go off. Okay, what do you do if there's a fire, Halila? Okay, we just said that we can't extinguish a flame on Shabbat. What do you do if there's a fire? Small, big. The rabbi said, the halacha with extinguishing a flame is that even if there's a big fire and the whole house is about to burn down, you cannot extinguish it if all you're going to lose is money. If all you're going to lose is money. The problem is that the way we live today, when we have neighbors very close, any house that is on fire, there might be pikuach nefashot. Life may be lost, not just money. So that is why anytime there is a big fire, okay, you are allowed to extinguish it. Now today we have, Baruch Hashem, firemen, and you can call and get their help. But if there is an immediate danger, and it's been determined that this fire may spread and people may get hurt, then you're allowed to get help or do it yourself if you need to. The question is, what happens if there's a little fire? When there's a little fire, that is when you use grama. How do you use grama? Let's say a little fire, a tablecloth got on fire. You soak the other end with liquid, preferably not water, because water, some say, melabin, is cleaning the cloth. Preferably wine or juices. So by the time the flame gets there, it's extinguished. You just grama, or you pour buckets. You put buckets or bottles of water around the flame to contain it. If you can do that, that's what you need to do. You can't extinguish the flame. You can't just go and extinguish it. Unless, what happens, you know that the whole house is going to burn down, there's going to be dangers. Some child might be stuck somewhere, you have no time to find him. So you don't start thinking, well, maybe I should prevent it from spreading. If you could prevent it, yes, another way of preventing is taking that cloth, if it's still a small flame, taking it off the table and putting it in the bathtub and let it die down over there. You see what I mean? There's a lot of things you can do to prevent the fire from spreading. If you can do that, that's what you need to do. You cannot extinguish the flame. The only time you can extinguish or get the goy's help is if it's a sakanat nefashot. Another time that you're allowed to extinguish a flame, that you're not allowed to, but you're allowed to ask the goy, even directly, is if there's farim, books, Torah, mezuzot, things like that are going to be burnt. You're allowed to ask the goy directly. Please come and extinguish it. You can't do it yourself, but you're allowed to ask the goy to. Yeah. You can take out the Sefer Torah, but you cannot extinguish the flame. You can only extinguish it if there's a sakanat nefashot. You're allowed to ask the goy. If there's no sakanat nefashot, you can't even ask the goy. Just because your furniture, the most beautiful furniture, that Italian furniture is burning, it's going to burn. You can't ask the goy to directly extinguish it. You can say to your neighbor who's not Jewish, listen, if somebody takes care of him, I will reward him handsomely. You're not telling him to do it. I wish somebody can take care of it. If he does it on his own, then it's okay. You don't have to stop him. But you cannot ask it, just because of a financial loss, you cannot extinguish a flame or even ask the goy to do it. Today, the only reason we are somewhat lenient, depending on the circumstances, is because there can be a sakanat nefashot. But if everybody's together, the kids are outside, only the house is burning, you can't go ahead. You can't extinguish the flames with water. If all it is the loss of money and no sakanat nefashot, there's no way that you can extinguish that house, that flame. Only because you suspect if there is a danger, immediate danger of sakanat nefashot, then you can do it. Let me just finish up over here. Rabbis made a gezerah not to take anything from the house outside, even though you have an eruv. Only the food that you need for Sodot Shabbat, only the clothing that you can wear on you. You can go back and forth and put on something to wear, right? Or sefarim you can take out. You cannot take out your furniture. The rabbis felt that since a person bahul and mamono, he will become desperate. He sees all his money going up in flames. He will start extinguishing it. He said, you know what? You can't take anything out from your house. Nothing, except for what you need immediately to eat. Other people can take, but you can't take out. Into your backyard, you're allowed to take out. Into your backyard, you're allowed to. But outside, you can't. So only what you really need right away, or what you're wearing. Because of the gezerah that you may come to extinguish the flame and which is of course a sur. It's permissible to shut the gas if the flame extinguished. You're allowed to close the gas. You should do it with a shinui. There's no more flame on the stove. You don't want the gas. It's dangerous. You're allowed to close it with a shinui. That's not a problem. Or any electrical appliances that there's a fire that's caught onto them. If that's also a danger, smoke, it may burn the house down. You're allowed to unplug it, like a fan or something. You can unplug it. There's no goy. You can do it yourself. If there's a goy, ask the goy to do it. Unless obviously you see that it's spreading, then you can do it yourself too. What if somebody's on fire? What do? Obviously, it's bikuach nefashot. Have him roll over. He has no time to take off his shirt or clothing. Have him roll over. Do whatever you can. If that doesn't help, throw him in the bathtub. Anytime there's a pikuach nefesh, you do whatever you can. A child is lost, you're allowed to call authorities. You see a robbery happening, armed robbery, right? Call 911, you pick up the phone. Anytime there's any emergencies, and I didn't write it down here, but it's all included here. Anytime there's a pikuach nefesh, or a hashash of a pikuach nefesh, you don't ask questions, you call authorities, you call 911, call the police. Anytime there's any type of danger that is affecting you, or your Jewish neighbor, right? Then you're allowed to call your authorities. Why? You can't, there's only, atalat nefashot only applies to Jews. The mitzvah, the chovah, the obligation and the duty that you have, right? That you can, where you can do a melacha d'orata, where you will be transgressing the melacha. There's a big difference. It only applies to Jews. To employ the help of others, you can ask the goy, of course, to help another goy. Depending what you need to do to get his help. Right. Obviously, the fire, because the fire can spread to the whole block, then it makes no difference who your neighbor is. Right? Then you call the fire department, or you do it yourself if there's no fire department. Right, because it's sakanah nefashot to the whole neighborhood. Alright? I just left out the kli lekabel mitzvot is an example of a vessel that you cannot put a vessel of water where sparks fall into it, because you're extinguishing the spark. That is another form of kibui that you cannot do on Shabbat.